Coronavirus outbreak and its potential impact to the U.S. The coronavirus outbreak has become a decidedly global occurrence, with governments across the globe struggling to plan effective responses while assuring increasingly anxious citizens. As different countries continue to confirm cases of this deadly virus, the United States has already taken its toll on the COVID-19. At the time of writing this article, there are 78 cases of the disease in the U.S. with one known dead, and most of the patients had recently traveled to Wuhan, China. What is coronavirus? Coronavirus is a large family of viruses whose effects range from triggering common cold to causing much more severe diseases, such as SARS, severe acute respiratory. Effects of coronavirus on the U.S. economy and commerce. So far, the effects of the coronavirus epidemic on U.S. commerce and economy have been very modest. However, the effect is likely to grow if the outbreak keeps spreading, and the factories shutdown in China continues. In response, investors both local and international are increasingly waking up to the possible effect of the outbreak that has already claimed thousands of lives. Chinese authorities declared that the number of new cases has reduced, but WHO and other health officials are cautious, noting thousands of infections could go unnoticed. Likewise, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention has asked communities and businesses to brace for impact. Let us consider the effect of this outbreak on some key areas of the United States. U.S. drug supply. The United States Food and Drug Administration is speeding up its monitoring of the drug supply for possible shortages, including products that may be at risk due to the outbreak that has shut down much of China. Oxford economists predicted the virus could slow down global growth to its lowest levels and could affect global supply chains. The administration raises concerns about the nation's convoluted and highly outsourced pharmaceutical supply chain. Most of the drugs used in the United States are manufactured abroad. Likewise, the chemicals and critical ingredients used to make these drugs are overwhelmingly made in China and other countries. The supply chain's roots now run deep that it is complicated to anticipate where critical shortages could emerge. However, the FDA claims that no company is currently reporting drug shortages due to the coronavirus. In an effort to get ahead of any problem, the agency, according to her spokesperson, has contacted 180 China-based drug manufacturers, asking them to appraise their supply chains and the need to notify the agency of any looming disruptions. Many U.S. drug companies buy Chinese-made pharmaceutical ingredients, in bulk, insulating themselves against a supply disruption for weeks, months, or even a year. Overall, the coronavirus is a deadly factor that can trigger retraction in business investment beyond the actual disruption of supply chains. Effect on the U.S. markets. On the U.S. markets, economic alarms continued to flash due to the increasing spread of COVID-19. Just as the outbreak entered a bothersome new phase, the Dow Jones Industrial Average suffered its worst 5-day slump in 4 years as investors increasingly absorbed worrisome forecasts. Furthermore, some analysts are further dropping their forecasts for the U.S. economy. The chief economist of Moody Analytics, Mark Zandi, predicts that the COVID-19 outbreak will reduce growth in the first 3 months of 2020 with a value that is more than his earlier forecast of 0.4% to 0.5% a point. He further predicts, for 2020, the virus will trim growth to about 1.7%. But if the epidemic becomes widespread globally, it almost certainly would lead to a global recession, including the U.S. Likewise, the stoppage of the production of Boeing's 737 MAX airliner is anticipated to snarl in its first quarter. The virus is likely to reduce stock prices by 5%, trimming business and consumer spending even if the market rebounds by the end of the year, Zandi says. The threat to travel and tourism. The outbreak of COVID-19 is also taking an increasingly severe toll on the U.S. through reduced tourism and travel. In recent years, Chinese tourism has become an important driver of U.S. GDP. About 3 million Chinese visits to the USA yearly, spending up to $6,500 per trip, which is 50% more than other foreign visitors in the USA. Many airlines have cancelled flights in and out of China, and the U.S. government has imposed restrictions on travels that bar any foreign national who has recently been to China from entering the United States. Consequently, visitations from China will almost certainly reduce by about 30% this year due to the epidemic, resulting in an economic loss of about $5.8 billion, says Moody, a tourism economist. The threat to the U.S. construction. According to Richard Branch, the chief economist of Dodge Data and Analytics, the U.S. construction industry is also possible to be affected by the coronavirus. This is because 30% of its products are imported from China, compared to any other country. Manufacturers will export less to Europe and Asia as their demand slackens. Imports from these regions are anticipated to result in shortages of retail products and spare parts in the U.S., including higher prices that restrain consumer spending. Except the virus is promptly curtailed, supplies will continue to tighten, making prices of building and building materials to shoot up, including potential cancellation or delays of projects, he further states. According to Zondi, while many Chinese factories are closed down and Chinese consumer demand is drooping, the U.S. exports to China will suffer, including plant equipment, computer chips, and aircraft. Even though factories can come up in the second half of the year to make up for the lost production and boost growth, a great part of the restaurant and hotel sales will most likely not be made up, Zondi further states. The threat to the U.S. economic growth. The coronavirus is also becoming a threat to the U.S. economic expansion that is rising. According to the chief economist at Grant Thornton, Diane Swank, the Wuhan coronavirus is already causing an economic pandemic. We have a global response that is literally closing down businesses. Some American manufacturers that use components sourced from China, particularly from infected areas such as Wuhan, will either have to shut down production or import parts outside China. If they shut down production, definitely they will need to dismiss workers, who, in response, will lower their spending. The longer this issue goes on, the more the risk of a sadistic cycle, she further states. Effect of coronavirus on eateries. There is no exception to the food and catering industry in the U.S. as restaurants starting to struggle amidst fears of coronavirus outbreak. Most of the restaurants are putting up different measures to ensure their customers are safe. If the virus is not contained quickly and it keeps spreading, I will not be surprised if some restaurants close down. Coronavirus and U.S. interest rates. One of the questions that investors and business owners are asking is if the coronavirus can affect interest rates. While other economists have a more evaluation view, Joe Brisuelas, chief economist of RSM, and David Burson, nationwide chief economist, state the advance of the virus has not influenced them to lower their forecasts. They both estimated that the epidemic would trim the first quarter growth by a rather modest 0.2 percentage point. Diane Swank is of the opinion that the Federal Reserve may reduce interest rates at its mid-March meeting due to the intensified outbreak. This is expected to boost stocks, but Fed has been playing the waiting game approach since reducing rates 3 times last year. On a contrary opinion, Zondi does not believe that the Federal Reserve will cut down interest rates again except the outbreak worsens considerably. What are scientists doing? Across the U.S. and separately in China, New York, and Texas, scientists are trying to create a vaccine for the virus, but do not expect it anytime soon. It might take more than a year before a vaccine actually becomes available. What you can do to protect yourself? Maintain social distance with anyone showing signs of coronavirus, such as sneezing and coughing, the WHO says. Other symptoms of this coronavirus include shortness of breath and fever. Severe cases can result in kidney failure, pneumonia, and even death. Scientists and health officials believe that this coronavirus started in an animal in Wuhan, China, and then spread to humans, so it is recommended you cook your eggs and meats thoroughly. Finally, the public should wash their hands regularly with water and soap for at least 20 seconds. What the Trump administration is doing once the U.S. health emergency declaration becomes effective: all U.S. citizens who have spent a minimum of 2 weeks in China's Hubei province and are returning to the States will be quarantined for about 14 days. The reason is due to the announcement by the State Department urging citizens not to travel to China due to the outbreak. Final thought: the coronavirus is gradually becoming a global epidemic whose effects can be severe if not contained in time. With the effects of COVID-19 on the U.S. as predicted, a clearer picture of the epidemic should become visible soon.